Hello everybody, welcome back to the Square the Circle music channel. We're talking about music again. What else will we talk about? This is an important, not an important list, but it's a super cool list because I'm doing a list of 10 albums that I bet you've never heard of, or maybe artists altogether that you've never heard of. I'm sure some of you probably have, a lot of you are probably much cooler than me, but I don't know, I'm pretty cool. So I'm just gonna start. I'm just gonna do it. Let's cut the fat, get right to it. The nitty gritty, the meat and potatoes. I've probably talked about a few of these groups already, and we've had discussions about music from down under, specifically speaking, rock and roll from down under. We're talking about the dark continent. No, not the dark continent. That's Africa. This is just the whatever you call it, the down under place, Australia. We've talked about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. We've talked about another one of my all-time super favorites, Psychedelic Porn Crumpets. This is another group from Australia, but they're called All India Radio. I don't even know how I came across these guys. I was, late night not researching, but just like looking for new fun stuff. And usually the stuff that's a little bit low key, kind of down tempo, ambient chill stuff, it pops up on my recommended because that's a lot of what I listen to. The art grabbed me because it's just beautiful, colorful, magenta, sunset, serene landscape. You look like you're in the desert, and you're like, yeah, this album's called Desert Tapes by All India Radio. I've never heard of them. I believe primarily the group itself comprised of really just one individual. His name is Martin Kennedy, I think. Really cool. When I purchased this record, this is something that, of course, I've never heard of, never seen it at a record store anywhere. So, I wanted to look into it. You have to get straight up on their Bandcamp and order from their Bandcamp. But the guy's name is Martin Kennedy. I ordered the record and it came to me in the mail, and it only took a week. And it had a personal handwritten postcard in it from the guy. He writes all this stuff and splices tapes and does all this great like ambient down tempo, real like chill stuff, and it just has these surreal soundscapes mixed with some, I want to say, some kind of like DJ kind of not hip hop, but I guess that's a place where they come from. After researching the band a little bit more, they're not really a band. It's this gentleman, Martin, and then he kind of picks and chooses musicians for different projects and different people with associations all over the board. I think he has included some more musicians from another Aussie band that I love dearly called Tortoise. But a lot of their stylings, besides this album, are kind of more in the genre of kind of like hip hop and DJ type music. This isn't the case. Not so much. It's definitely an ambient album, and so highly recommend it. Probably never heard of them. Now you have. They're really great. I hadn't heard of them until a couple years ago, and so this one has been getting a lot of play in my house recently. So definitely check it out if you're into the ambient stuff. All right, well that begins the list. Continuing in the theme of obscurity here. Probably never heard of these guys either, or in this specific case, this woman. Hedvig Mollestad is her name, I think, and she has another surname. I'm not sure. I think it's Thomason. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Her name is Hedvig Mollestad Thomason, but the band itself, I believe, just titled Hedvig Mollestad. she is from, and the musicians that she plays with are from Norway. I talk a lot about Norway. I like Norwegian music a lot. This one coming from a pretty prolific label all throughout Scandinavia. They're called Rune Gramophone. Rune Gramophone. Check them out. All kinds of dope shit coming from this record label. If you folks are into, Norwegian or any of the Scandinavian like black metal and shit like that, you're gonna love that label. So check out the label Rune Gramophone. If you're into metal, if you're into stuff that's, like I said, a little more obscure. This stuff, holy shit, this album, what's it called? Echidna. Echidna. It's Ekhidna. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing these incorrectly. I don't speak any of the Scandinavian languages. Echidna by Hedvig Mollestad. She plays jazz guitar, and man, is she good. I mean, really good. Blew me away from the moment I heard it. Super kind of really subtle as it kind of like enters into it. I'm sure a lot of the tracks on this album start with a real kind of like smoky, quiet, very subtle, introduction. Nothing just, kind of abruptly starts. Almost every track has a real kind of like slow to start kind of feel. It's got a real dark tone to it. You're never sure exactly what's gonna happen next, like what's coming. It's jazz rock. She plays jazz guitar, but it's just jazz metal infused. Like it's like black, crustcore metal mixed with jazz. There's horns on this album. There are strings on this album. This is one of the most eclectic pieces of work I've come across. And I'm really surprised actually, like I kind of forgot I did a video of my best of 2020, but it was more of kind of like a real like deep personal stuff that got me through 2020. I had just discovered this album, and I hadn't dropped it more than maybe probably once or twice, and kind of started listening to it before I got the chance to like make that video and include it in my list of the 2020. It's just like other stuff I had been listening to for so long, it just had taken precedence. So this one kind of got thrown on the back burner, unfortunately. It was a 2020 album, but man, now that I've really had a few months to kind of like put that other stuff, away for a little while and kind of like listen to some newer stuff, this shit blew me away. I feel like I'm listening to like Neurosis. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this incredible, black metal kind of crustcore metal band called Neurosis. Been around since the 90s, like killer fucking band. Like I feel like I'm listening to like a jazz, down tempo version of them with just this smoking hot chick guitar player. I'm just like, where the fuck did these guys come from? Oh yeah, Norway. All of the best music right now in the world, in my opinion, it's coming out of those Scandinavian countries, those socialist nations that just got it figured out, where everyone lives modestly. They figured out how to live modestly and focus their free time and what they love to do and make art and make music, and it's just some of the best music and art and just stuff coming out of those Scandinavian countries, man. Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Sweden. It's just, yeah, great shit. Everyone check out Hedvig Mollestad. The album is called Echidna. Crazy metal, doom, jazz, kind of psychedelic shit. Way cool. Okay, continuation into the obscurities. We go deeper and deeper and deeper. We're going to the little isle of Japan. Of course, this is a very interesting duo of Japanese gentlemen. The band, sort of a band, called Inuyama Land. the album, it's tough to pronounce. Danzinden Pojidon, I believe. Danzinden Pojidon by the group, which they titled Inuyama Land. It's two gentlemen, two Japanese gentlemen who very notorious, very famous. Gained a lot of speed and notoriety throughout the late 70s and early 80s when, the electronic music scene was really burgeoning, really, it was taking place in Japan, is where it was basically birthed. And they were at the forefront of that. I believe one of the gentlemen, I can't remember, I believe it was Yasushi Yamashita. I think he was in a group called the Yellow Magic Band, or what were they called? The Yellow Magic Orchestra, I think, with Ryuichi Sakamoto, a very famous Japanese composer and pop artist. And in the 70s and 80s, it was like a pop band, but they were doing like kind of prog fusion pop out of Japan. I believe he was in that group. You guys have probably heard of them. But anyway, yeah, this one being a little more obscure, and this being, they dabbled with the, kind of ambient soundscape, that real kind of minimalistic idea, but each artist in their own respect was doing that. But then when they combined their efforts, it became a little more, maybe a little pop sensible. They were almost kind of making pop songs sometimes. This album specifically, yes, there are some moments of pop music. There really is. But the vast majority of it being, some ambient soundscape type music, all synth, that type of down-tempo type stuff, but really creative. Their technology, when this album was created, I believe in the 80s, early 80s, this is a repress, this is a 2020 repress, but I believe this album was originally 83, originally released in 83, so the technology had really come a long way. Things were starting to sound really cool. Their technique and stuff that they were able to pull off, it was, way out of the archaic sense, like becoming, much more, pushing the envelope and really getting some really cool sounds and some really great ideas, So I liken it a lot to, of course, the krautrock stuff that was going on in Germany. You hear a lot of influences back and forth from these guys to the krautrock scene in Germany, and vice versa, sharing ideas and concepts, with Klaus Schulze and Edgar Fries, the Tangerine Dream scene and all that. And so, and of course, bands like, Can and stuff like that, like, Japanese culture, like, has a giant, influence and big part of their soul with that, shared with the German scene, with what was going on with the, the technological, prowess mixed with the music. And so fueling that synth pop and fueling that, electronic wave that began in the late 70s, mid 70s, and through the 80s. So everyone check this out. I'm sorry, I've been babbling kind of incoherently about this, but it's really hard to kind of put my finger on, because when I put this on, I just kind of check out. This is my checkout music. This is the stuff I put on when I'm like, all right, the coffee's on, and I'm just gonna kind of stare at the wall for an hour. This is my stare at the wall music. So, but everyone ought to get a piece of this. Pretty obscure, pretty unknown. You guys ought to look into it. Inuyama Land, Inoyama Land, all one word. Check it out. Hope you're enjoying the list. I hope I'm not babbling too much. It was a good week. Been having fun. Thanks again for, visiting my channel. If you get a chance, please thumb up or thumb down. Don't really care. It's much funner to have thumbs up. If you want to talk to me about the dumb shit that I say, that's fine. Go ahead and comment, but please subscribe, and you'll keep getting notifications. I'm going to keep on this train of one video a week, and I'll always do, a check myself type of video later on in the week and talk about the fact check myself. So yeah, just gonna keep plugging away here. Another one on the list of stuff I don't think you've probably heard. By now, if you've watched any of my videos, you've heard me talk about them. So maybe you've heard a little bit. Maybe I've kind of like, tickled your senses about them. You've got your ears pricked like, well, maybe I ought to check these out. Major speaks really highly of them. They are just fantastic. More than fantastic. They're one of my favorite bands. They became one of my favorite bands years ago when I discovered them. And luckily they're one of those bands that are so fucking talented that they have no problem just like, wham, just putting it out. They just put out and put out and put out. And I love that. It's like album every year. Again, talking about a band called Pat Pier from Denmark. This is their 5th release, so it's just titled Roman numeral 5 or V. Super cool album art. It's got this weird like patina, like rusted stainless steel weird thing. I don't even know. The photographs that whoever takes the photographs for their album covers, I'm assuming it's one of the gentlemen in the band, really has a knack for his photogs. Really good at what he does. This is what began a series of their album art where they started taking photographs and featuring that. Beforehand, I had talked about their art style, and whatever art style it's called, it's beautiful. I'll feature it in a video someday soon. But they went from that kind of art style for their first like 3 or 4 albums, and then on their 5th album, they decided to start going with some beautiful photographs. And so for their 5th album and their 6th album, and I believe their upcoming album, which I believe it's titled Jams, which is a really horrible album name, but whatever, they can do whatever the hell they want. They're kind of in a ne'er-do-wrong type of category for me right now. Like they could just, take a dump and put it in a box and label it Pat Pier, and I'd be fucking tickled pink. Yeah, they're continuing along this line of using photographs for their album art. I'm not sure what their new release is going to do. I think it's called Jams. It's due out in a few months, I think. Well, maybe by April. So, in only a month. So we'll see what that beholds. Ought to be fun. So again, this album titled 5. These guys just playing some wicked cool, insane, up-tempo jazz rock, psychedelic jazz rock, moments of heavy psychedelia, almost bordering on like metal music, prog influences up the wazoo. There's moments where they get some synth involved. I believe it's only 3 guys, so they're just rocking guitar, bass, drums. But I think at one point, or at many points, sorry, both their bass player and their guitar player at any given moment, I'm sure their drummer as well, will take on the helm and start. They all have like a little side instrument that they just know how to do. I've seen drummers do it. They'll be playing, and while they're playing with one hand, they can play some synth with their other hand. Guitar players do it too. They drop their guitar for a second and just go over and start playing some killer shit on a Mellotron or whatever. Musicians have been doing that shit for 50, 60 years. So these guys can do it all. And of course, their main vehicle, their main weapon of choice being jazz. They take the jazz and then they really morph it. They morph it and just take it into all sorts of beautiful, exciting places. So once again, emphatically, I entreat you people, please go buy yourself some Pat Pier. Any of their albums, all of their albums. They have 6 full-length LPs. This is a double LP. I think at least 2 or 3 of them are double LPs. They have a live at Roadburn that they did that is just smashing. It is amazing. And then they have a new full-length LP coming out called Jams, which from the review I've read is, I guess it's just a series of just, jam, like in the studio session type of stuff that they've done. That's just all free jazz, completely um, just drummed up off the top of their head, I guess, nothing written down. They just kind of like press record and see what happens, and then shit, press it to wax, fucking sell it. They're amazing. Yeah, like I said, kind of ne'er do wrong in my book, so everyone should get some. Okay, here we go again. This one, I decided to kind of take a turn from more of the modern day releases. Well, I mean, some of it's kind of, you know, decades old and stuff like that, but this one's like an even little bit older of a testament to the days of folk rock, when things were kind of, you know, getting away from the real romantic folky or beatnik era of, you know, the late 50s up into the early 60s and what was going on in New York, Greenwich Village, art, you know, Simon and Garfunkel, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of scene spread up into the West Coast, and then of course, you know, the hippie stuff took over. But as it moved its way up north, everyone in Canada was kind of getting their own little version of it and taking on that helm and like, hey, what can we do with this? And they take that beautiful kind of, like I said, that beatnik poetry, you know, folky type of style, and then they took their version of rock and roll and put their twist on it. And so you end up with this really great folk rock band called Beau Dommage. French Canadians, obviously. But I'm sure a lot of you folks may have seen this in a bargain bin somewhere, dollar bin, kind of went like, yeah, whatever. You know, these folks are fucking amazing. I got this in a dollar bin. I think I paid 10 cents for it, to tell you the truth. I got it at fucking Value Village like 10 years ago for a dime. And it's in amazing condition. Because people just kind of look at it, Beau Dommage, it's all in French on the back, and they're just kind of like, bleh, whatever. You know, or maybe they took it home and it wasn't their cup of tea. I don't care. I think everyone ought to give this a chance. One woman, 4 men, they, I mean, just for the guitar work alone, we're talking it's all primarily acoustic guitar, but the jams that they're pulling off, it just really, really fucking great. Likened to, I mean, the woman's voice, you know, since they're singing in French, it has that real kind of a distinct flair, the way that French rolls off the tongue, you know, so they really kind of have that certain air, you know, if anyone's familiar with, like, you know, Jacques Brel or any of those, you know, French folk style, you know, things that were going on, it just, yeah, it has its own, you know, os mutantes, that kind of stuff, you know, it really has its own kind of flair and its own type of category. And these guys really, they have that air to them. She just sings absolutely beautifully, but is not, you know, the band isn't dominated by her vocals, you know, they all sing. There's at least 3 singers, and they complement each other so well, like what folk music was meant for in the 70s. This was like in early 70s, I believe 72, pardon me, 74. So still, you know, that sound of the early 70s, you know, they complement each other so well, not just with their instrumentations, but their vocals. They, you know, people knew how to sing together back in the 70s, you know what I mean? You get that Peter, Paul, and Mary, that type of thing, you know, they knew how to, like, harmonize with each other, but not just straight harmonize. They knew how to play off of each other using their rhythms, you know, call and echo and response type of stuff, you know, and just in the French tongue, and it's just like, oh God, it just tickles you, you know. But then musically speaking, like there's some rock songs on here. Like, it's great. It's like fucking Neil Young, the French Canadian Neil Young with, you know, Joni Mitchell backing him up. Like, it's really, really great. So get on whatever search engine or music finder, whatever you use, type in Beau Dommage. If you type it into like Pandora or something like that, you're not going to find it. It's pretty obscure. I have never seen this in a record store, ever. Like I said, I found it in a bargain bin, and I've never seen it in a record store. I've asked all the super smart, awesome people I know down at my record store is like, you ever hear these guys? Like, man, they're really great. So yeah, get on the interwebs, check them out. Anyone that has a penchant toward really loving and liking the styles of the early 70s with, folk rock, more of kind of like a moderate folk rock, you'll really dig this shit. Specifically the track, man, well, the whole A-side is awesome. They have an homage track in here to that Chinatown song. I don't think they didn't write it. It's a standard. It's like a 50s or 60s standard, like kind of cheesy jazz standard called Chinatown. But they do a version of that that's really great, kind of like up-tempo folk style. But anyway, the last track on the A side, track 5 on the A side, is called Les Picbois. Les Picbois, Picbois, Picbois. That is French for woodpecker. So it's called The Woodpecker. Dude, the album, that song alone is worth spending $10 on this album, or whatever you got to pay for it. I'm sure I think I looked it up on Discogs. It's probably $10 or $12. You can get it for $10 or $12 in near mint condition. That track alone, dude, that song is fucking great. Give it a spin. Beau Dommage. Okay, in the spirit of the female vocal stylings, I picked this one out too. These guys, they're getting some notoriety, so they're maybe not quite as obscure as I'd like to portend, but I came across them, of course, everybody watches Joe Rogan's podcast and whatever else, but you never would have thought that you'd discover any music from Joe Rogan. He's obviously not a musical person. He doesn't pretend like he is. He has horrible taste in music. Every time he talks about music, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about when it comes to music. He listens to dog shit dad rock, BTO and all that dumb shit. But he knows what it means, seemingly. He seems to know what it means to be a heartfelt, hardworking person, musician. So when he does befriend musicians and he sees them and finds them, he really latches on and is like, these guys are real people. They're singing and playing about real shit, Americana, hard working, dirty type people singing about, whiskey and trucks and dirt and mud. Well, I don't know, whatever. I'll stop talking about him, but I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about now. He's had this duo on his podcast, I think at least twice. That's where I heard about them and saw them interviewed and discovered their music. They're so beautiful. They're so wonderful. Really fun to see them interviewed and hear them talk about their music first I never even heard their music at all. I just saw these two people being interviewed by Joe Rogan and I'm like, who the fuck are these guys? And they're hilarious. They have great senses of humor. Their banter between each other is really great. They have an awesome energy. Maybe they had dated at one point in time in their life, but I don't think they're romantically involved as of now. But maybe there's some romance that is kind of like in the past, maybe helps influence their music to a certain degree. Maybe it may be good, bad, negative, who knows. But a gentleman who sings backup vocals and plays his guitar to her main vocals, and she plays the fiddle. And of course they have backing musicians on the album itself, but just them as a duo is incredibly impressive. And that's primarily what the structure of their art is, just the duo themselves. They're called Honey Honey. I actually really like the name of the group. That's a catchy, great name, Honey Honey. I believe this is their third album. It's titled 3, I'm assuming. They have, not achieved monster success by any means yet. So the albums that they, put out prior to this, I've never seen them anywhere, never found them anywhere. I had to dig deep just to find a copy of this on vinyl. Actually, I think it's just as hard to find a copy in CD format as well. But finding this in LP format was it was a challenge. But I wanted it because I adore these guys, and when they came on that podcast and I saw them interviewed, and then they played what's that fantastic John Prine song, Angel of Montgomery, and they, oh my God, I almost started crying. Her beautiful singing voice, his equally as soulful and beautiful voice, but his very just you could see them pouring the emotion, like they must worship all of those gods of country and folk, from back in the day, your John Prine and whoever else, and seeing them embody that, the spirit of that song, wow, it just took me away. And so I immediately was like, whoop, gotta get on my phone, gotta find their album and fucking get it, But yeah, continue to live in moderate obscurity. I haven't heard or seen anything about them. I don't know a lot about modern day popular country rock. I don't know anything about the scene. I don't know if they're on country radio stations. I know what I like, and I know what's good. So I found these guys. I like them. The country albums that I do own are kind of more of the standard persuasion. I kind of like the popular standard stuff. Anything of the recent, last 2-3 decades, I kind of am like, no thank you. Don't really want a lot to do with it. So this is a diamond in the rough, in my opinion, when it comes to modern day country rock. But these guys could be classified equally, amongst Americana folk, country type of things. That's why they sing songs by John Prine and they sing that type of stuff, because they're a working man's band. Really respect and love what they do. Again, Honey Honey. The album's just titled 3. So check them out. They're amazing. Just amazing. The song, that song. Track number 2 on the A side. Research, get on whatever you use for your music player, and listen to this song. It's called Yours to Bear. Holy moly. Whew. That one will get you. If you've been through any turbulent times with the opposite of sex, or maybe the same sex, whatever float your boat, if you've ever had any issues of love in your life, that song will take your heart out through your asshole and kick it against the wall a couple times. It's a good one. Okay, gonna keep rocking on here. Rocking on this one. Oh man, this is so great. What are we on here? We're like on number, is this 7? 6 maybe? Who knows? I didn't number it. This isn't a top 10. There's no pecking order in this list. This is just 10 of the awesome obscurities. And this one definitely falls in the ranks. When everybody's heard of these guys, or this guy per se. This is none other than what's his name? Dan Auerbach. I believe that's his name, right? Super famous guy from the Black Keys, of course. But this is not another Black Keys album. This is something entirely different. The band is called The Arcs, on the label that the Black Keys are on, the None Such label. Puts out a lot of great shit. Has for a century. I think None Such has been around. Maybe not quite that long. I'm talking out my ass, but None Such is one of those labels that has been around for a long fucking time. The Arcs, the album called Yours, Dreamily. I don't even know how I discovered this album. When I heard it, I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you. I thought it's like, this sounds like the Black Keys, but it's not so like boring, just blues rock, kind of like, we're a 2-piece band, we're playing blues, stomping White Stripes, whatever. And I'm like, nah, not to be a hater. I mean, the Black Keys will resonate in the halls of time forever. Dan Auerbach is just a giant. The guy has so much soul. So much soul. Fucking amazing artist. But this group, it's a full band of musicians. There's got to be at least 3 or 4 of them. I haven't read the liner notes well enough to really recognize anybody's names or know exactly who's, in the band, but I know that there's got to be at least 3 to 4 players. And I'm sure Dan Auerbach plays many of the instrumentations that happen throughout the album, because there's lots of little things that are punched in and all kinds of wonderful little instrumentations and just let me get a little bit more straightforward here. So this album's called Yours Dreamily. It is definitely Dan Auerbach at his finest. Very soulful, very just super bluesy, awesome. He's playing incredible guitar. But the things that he's doing with his guitar are not just kind of right down Tin Pan Alley, slide blues like what he's normally doing. He's getting a lot more creative. This is like a psychedelic blues album. Huge psychedelic influences. I hear a ton of funk, like the Funkadelic album, the Maggot Brain album in here. I hear it's like listening to a psychedelic blues rock album produced by the Roots, if that makes any sense. And I don't know anything about hip hop. I don't know anything about any of it. I'm a rock and roll guy. I'm like a rock and roll, hard rock, metal, prog, punk. I'm kind of as straightforward, kind of regular, boring white dude as it comes. I don't know anything about hip hop and the culture, but this has that. I could just feel it. I feel it in there, and there's just little elements and little just notes that just scream to me, from the culture of the South and stuff like that. Because I believe he is from, isn't he from Mississippi? Somewhere down south. So you can tell, he's raised in the deep South. He's raised around a lot of, black culture and soul and R&B, and that's what he was raised on. You can tell the guy just exudes it. It is second nature to him. He just bleeds it. And no better than on this album, because it just has a little piece of everything. It's so great. It's just fan-fucking-tastic. Colorful, the production value is really, really great. Far surpasses the stuff that's just kind of the raw, bare bones nature of what he does with the Black Keys. Like I said, I do respect, but after Thick Freakness, I'm just kind of okay, I've heard more than enough of this for a lifetime. And it was just ridiculously popular around here, the Eugene scene. Forever. It's just people playing it to fucking death. So, got over that shit pretty quick. But find this album. It might be a little bit more difficult for you to find on a local scale, wherever you may be from. If you're from a larger city, you probably won't have a hard time. But, for me, here in the Eugene Springfield area, which, consists of a population combined of maybe close to 200,000 people, which is not very much. There's only 3 or 4 record stores in this town. 3, really, that have survived this god-awful pandemic. There's 3 record stores in town. I've never fucking seen this anywhere. I've never seen it at any record shows. I have myself have been a vendor, obviously, for many years. I've done record shows, Portland, Seattle, locally here in Eugene, Springfield. Never seen this album anywhere. So I had to get on the interwebs and I had to go to Discogs, which I hate fucking doing, but it was released, quite a while ago, 2015, I believe. 2015 release, and it's just not something that comes through your record store when you live in a small town. And then when, they get on their interwebs and their dealer and whoever, they get their records from, it's an inability to be able to get this because they only pressed whatever, a couple thousand, and it's boop, that's it, fun little side project, and so get a piece of this side project, one of the better side projects, one of the more obscure side projects. Super, super cool fucking album. Everyone will enjoy this album. Everyone. Your mom, your dad, your sister, your grandma. Your fucking grandma will like this album. I guarantee it. My grandma would. Okay. Man, so this band, man, I'm glad I found this band. And I'm really surprised that no one has really, besides anyone that I've ever talked to, nobody has ever heard of this group. They're an instrumental band. That's probably why a lot of folks, they kind of slip under people's radar. People don't love instrumental bands as much as I do. I've come to find a lot of people need stuff that is lyrically driven, or at least has, thematic elements of like having a leader, like a killer guitar player, or someone or something that is, kind of really giving it a driving presence, a driving presence. This group to me has a very pleasant absence of that, a lacking of anything that has any ego or any sense of like centered, I don't know. It's hard to really explain. But a very talented group of musicians playing in a genre that encompasses so many things. Could never begin to put my finger on what it is these guys do, whatever genre you try to place them in. This is a band called 6 Parts 7. The album, what is it called again? Casually Smashed to Pieces. They have a couple albums, more than a couple. They have at least 3 albums. You can't fucking buy them anywhere. Even on Discogs, any of their other albums are like, they're $200 because they pressed 30 copies. If you went to one of their shows between the years of probably, I mean, they're kind of like a, 2005 to 2015 era band. Yeah, I'm not even sure exactly when this album was released, to be quite honest. But this was the only one I could find that I could afford, or that was readily available. And I am so glad I snagged it up. Where to begin? They'll have some correlations here down the road when I'll talk about the parallels that these guys have. But the best I can do for you is they have elements of jazz, because there are horns, subtle, to say the least, very subtle horns. But I'd say anywhere from 5 to 6 musicians with what they're doing. There's some keyboards, guitar, bass, drums, some auxiliary instruments. There's a few, maybe one horn player who will go between different horns. There's sometimes some trombones, sometimes some very muted, subtle trumpet. No saxophone, I believe. None of the horns, those types of horns, none of the wood. I can't even. I mean, so here's the parallel. This will help. The parallels being they're on that album, or excuse me, that label Suicide Squeeze, which is, I believe, an offshoot of Isaac Brock, the record label that he began. Or no, I'm sorry. Isaac Brock being the lead singer, music writer for Modest Mouse. The first couple of Modest Mouse albums were on the Suicide Squeeze label. I believe they're out of Tacoma, Washington, or maybe out of Seattle, Issaquah, somewhere in that realm of southern Washington State. But definitely have that. That's all I can. That's the best I can do. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have an idea in our heads of like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that sounds like. That just sounds like what people call indie rock, or what they did call indie rock like 15 years ago. What we called in the 90s just alt rock. We just called it alternative rock. It was the stuff that was on the college radio stations that you didn't hear about, that no one talked about. Modest Mouse, Built to Spill, things of that nature. These guys being an instrumental band and much more low key, they didn't gain any real speed. They didn't gain any notoriety. They may get played on independent music radio stations somewhere, but I just can't put my finger on it. You got to get on the internet or whatever you use to listen to music and just put them on, and you'll be pleasantly surprised and taken away. Instrumental music, subtle at times, a little bit more upbeat at times. The keyboards that are injected into it have moments of kind of like real low bass rattling moments, but then again, real just kind of like upper register, kind of playing around, almost jazzy type of moments. Yeah, just check them out. They'll give you that feeling of kind of like the lo-fi kind of era of like, the early aughts to early teens. If you were listening to the Shins at any given time, a lot of those like sub pop bands from the early 2000s through the 2010s, you're gonna get those types of vibes. But I think these guys have a much more mature sound, a much more, I guess, kind of just like coming from a place of jazz, a jazz element to them. So just, sorry to be so fucking vague. Sorry to be so weird about it and I'll be honest with you, I can't even tell you a name of any of their songs because they should just be nameless. It's one of those groups and one of those bands that just feels like just kind of this like enigma where they're just like, it's just happening. I was talking earlier about whatever group that was in a Yamaland album where it is. I just put this on and I'm just like pleasantly transported to Saturn, where I can just like be there. And I'm just there and I'm just staring at the wall, drinking my cup of coffee, and all is well. And there's nothing, what's that wonderful line from the movie we love so much, High Fidelity, where he's so frustrated with Jack Black's character and he's like chain smoking in his record store all day, drinking coffee, and he's like, I just want to fucking put something on that I can just ignore, It's one of those albums, like it's one of those fantastic albums you can just put on and just kind of ignore. But not really, you won't ignore it because it's fantastic, but it'll put you in that headspace, it'll put you in that place where you feel very subdued and very at peace. So, it's a blissful album. 6 parts, 7. Casually smashed to pieces. Very good stuff. Okay, we're going on and on and on. I go on and on. I'm sorry. I like to talk about music, and believe it or not, it's like I never even really say much, do I? So number 9 on the list. Here's another one that is, oh man, I'm gonna have another rough time kind of getting it out. Much like what the band I was just discussing, 6 Part 7. Here's another obscure band you've likely never heard of that is almost impossible to really put a label on. Okay, maybe a little easier. They definitely fall into the category of ambient music. Ambient drone music. We're talking very minimalistic, very drone oriented. So for anyone that doesn't really understand what I mean by drone, anything that is a drone is kind of like, music comprised of, very, very minimalist features, generally being like, most songs are all like one tone. We're talking one note, one tone, one note, very little variation in the actual play of, notes on a scale. They find a rhythm or a feel or a style, and then they have that drone, that sound, much like a mantra or what have you, and they just take it to the hilt because they're playing with all sorts of sound effects and synthesizers, percussion or whatever, what have you. But that's kind of what I mean by, ambient music that is drone oriented. And that's what these guys do. These guys are called Stars of the Lid. Interesting name. Not really sure what it's really supposed to be talking about, as far as like a lid on the universe, a lid on the planet. I'm not sure. Stars of the Lid. This album, all of their album names have kind of like a fun continuation, play on words about the band title. Stars of the Lid and Their Refinement of the Decline. They have other albums. One's called The Tired Sounds of Stars of the Lid. And anyway, they're fantastic. I believe they're just a duo. They're a duo, much like many other, electronic, ambient, whatever types of artists out there, where it's, it's minimalist music, and so it's achieved, minimally by two individuals, two gentlemen. I'm not really sure where they're from, where they hail from. I've never, another one of those bands where like, they're so obscure that I kind of like appreciate and leave it at that. I leave it to be obscured. 6 Part 7, I don't know shit about those guys because I enjoy the music so much. It is what it is, and it serves its purpose for me, for my heart and my head. I don't need anything more from them. I don't need to research them. I don't need to know who they are, where they come from, what it's all about. It fills the hole in my soul. That's what a lot of the bands that I talk about, but especially these bands, because they are the more obscured bands. They fill that hole in my soul. They've done their part for me, and I bought their album. I played my part to them. They're getting, the psychic energy and love back. I hope they feel it from me. And that's what these guys do. I don't know anything about them, and it's going to stay that way. Because it's, like I said, it's another one of those albums. I put this on, and I'm just like, it fills the void. I mean, that's like a really cheap way to put it. It doesn't just fill the void. Like it puts something in me that is like, I need. It is desired. It like becomes a part of me. It's fulfilling. It doesn't just fill the void. It is fulfilling to me. It has become a part of like sometimes my daily regimen. I'll put this on. I'll water the plants, and I'll do a few push-ups or pretend to, I don't know. It's that type of music where it's so ethereal and so just psychically like fulfilling. Everybody ought to check these guys out. If you have big feelings in your heart for anything of that nature, kind of like ambient music, minimalist stuff, that just, if that really tickles your fancy, you'll love the shit out of these guys. They've really just been a pleasure to listen to. This is a triple LP. It's a monster of an album. You're getting a lot out of this. Beautiful art presentation. All of the inserts have just like this individual little bit of like artwork. I love their style. Minimalist. In the best way and form. Stars of the Lid. Check him out. Well, thanks for joining me tonight. It's been a lot of fun. This is the last band that I have tonight. This group, they're probably, I'd say they're probably the most well-known of all these artists I've talked about today. A group that comes from Japan, an actual rock band. They're 4-piece, well, sometimes 5, depending on the situation. Another one of those groups that kind of like shares members with other groups. They're all on like a record label that they all kind of like helped, get off the ground, and they like share members. They go on tour with each other. An incredible group of dudes. They are called Kikugaku Moyo. This album is called House in the Tall Grass. They have at least 3 albums I think this is their second. Their first one, I can't remember what it's called. Please forgive me. I've listened to it a couple times, but I had never owned it. I haven't bought it. I bought this the moment I heard it. It took me away. And they have a newer release. It just came out 2 years ago, I believe in early 2019. It's called Masana Temples. Really great. These guys are a psychedelic kind of fusion jazz psych rock band. I don't know if I really want to say jazz, but dude, there's lots of elements of jazz. They are a psychedelic band. They're a psychedelic rock band, but they have like progressive elements. You can tell that they worship 70s rock. Their lead singer, this really effeminate, skinny, good-looking Japanese man. He wears bell bottoms and he's got patches all over his jacket and sings in a kind of a higher register. He's got the really hard like Yes vibes, like John Anderson vibes, and super cool psychedelic rock. They have like a guy who plays sitar, and he plays numerous things. He plays like some Japanese wood flute and some sitar, and so you're getting all sorts of like Eastern influence, with the sitar sounds and the flute sounds. It's just super cool. While they're like the guys in the back there are playing bass and guitar and drums are playing like straight up like psych rock, like mixed with some elements of like krautrock and mixed with some elements of like just lots of stuff, and it's all happening at once. I went and saw these guys here in Eugene a couple years ago. I took my daughter. She was I think she was about 9 years old at the time, and this was her first rock concert. She had never been to a rock concert, and they just knocked her little socks off. It was so much fun. They were so captivating. They were extremely excited. I mean, they'd come to Eugene a couple times, I think, and they just love it here. To them, this just feels like their place. They were saying that on stage, that they feel like they're at home, back in Japan when they come to Eugene, because it's so down to earth, so low key. Everyone's just like really nice. Doesn't treat them like they're these like insane like rock gods, because they really aren't. They're really just they're an independent band. They're relatively unknown. Most people I know have never heard of them. With a name like Kikagaku Moyo, that doesn't just roll off the tongue. It's not shit you're gonna hear on the radio. So, but yeah, sometimes very subtle, sometimes very like psychedelic rock, punchy in the face. We're talking like, kind of reminds me of some of the acid jazz, kind of weirdo stuff you've heard from Frank Zappa, Captain Beefheart, and then really subtle prog moments like I was saying, like Yes and King Crimson, some real like not drone, but you understand what I mean as far as kind of just like really hypnotic moments, like where they'll just like take that krautrock thing and they're just like they've got this this thing they're rolling on, and they're gonna do that for like 8 minutes, and it goes into like a trance kind of krautrock kind of thing. It was super cool. Yeah, multifaceted, multi-genre, beautiful artwork. The album that came after this as well, Masana Temples, much more colorful, but also like very beautiful, more of kind of an East Asian theme with that one. But yeah, everyone ought to really check these guys out. Kikagaku Moyo. A little bit more obscure than most people would know. Let's see, the record label I was telling you about, really cool. There's a bunch of bands on there. Oh, what's that name? What's the name of that band? I can't remember. Minami Deutsch. There's a band that they are brother bands with, and on this label it's called Guru Brain. That's the record label. And there's another band called Minami Deutsch that they tour around with. I got to see them when I saw Kikagaku Moyo. They opened up for Kikagaku Moyo. They're a lot more kind of like the trancey, like, the name Minami Deutsch, I believe, is a shout out to like Deutsch, for crowd. That's what they call krautrock in Japan. It's like they call it German music. Like it doesn't have like a translatable name. They just call it, like, they don't call it electronic music. They call it German music. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't explain that right, but you get where I'm coming from. But yeah, super cool bands. Kikogaku Moyo, I believe Japanese, it translates to revolving patterns or geometric patterns or something like that. So yeah, you understand what I'm saying. Real, like, kind of like psychedelic, yeah, really cool influence. It's great. I love how our cultures influence each other, especially in the last 50 years with, you know, Japanese culture and American culture, how they just like ping pong, you know, influencing each other in so many ways, so many different ways and types. Okay, I'll shut up. You guys have been great. I love you so much. Again, thanks for visiting me. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If I bored you to death and it's just like worse than pulling teeth, give it a thumbs down. I don't care either way. But subscribe, because that makes it fun for me and for you. And I get to like look at my phone in the morning and there's like little things that say, hey, so-and-so subscribe to your channel. Yay. So anyway, thanks for being here. I love you guys. Be good to each other. Spin records. Don't forget to square the circle when you're done.